NXT has gone through so many eras at this point, they're hard to take into account. It went from being the old FCW to the developmental territory, a proper developmental territory, back in 2012. Then it gained this reputation of luring in all these great independent talents, and that led to the legendary NXT Black and Gold era. That eventually, the pandemic pretty much put the nail in the coffin for that, unfortunately, and it became NXT 2.0, which is where we're at right now. Now, through all these eras, NXT has always had one meaning, one true goal, and that is to develop the talents that WWE needs on Raw, SmackDown, and on their main roster. That is NXT's full purpose. And just like with AEW Dark or Dark Elevation or Ring of Honor Wrestling in this case, NXT, due to some lack of time, I don't have that much availability to keep up with the show, but I damn well know that the people that work there, the small clips I've seen, the few shows in recent memory that I've seen of all of these NXT, Ring of Honor, Dark, Elevation, everything, there are way too many talented people both in the ring and outside of the ring, and that is enough. I know that for a fact. I don't have to go back and watch it. It would help if I did, but like I said, I have a full-time job and I have this to worry about. I need to make more time for it. Hopefully down the line I'll get a better chance to do so. But one of the main things with NXT, one of the many things that I struggle with is the fact that WWE doesn't really define what they need out of NXT. Is NXT its own brand to the point that it generates its own revenue, it generates its own stars, it's its own subsidiary of WWE in a very formal concept, or is it purely a developmental territory meant to train independent superstars and athletes that they recruit to get ready for the main roster? At this point, it seems like a hybrid, and that's my issue with it. Because currently NXT, and this has been the case for the past 3 to 4 years, NXT is basically a pit stop. For the most part, if it's over a year, it's an unnecessary pit stop for most of these wrestlers, for most of these performers. Because, as you may have seen, they're in the 12-man tournament on Raw and SmackDown these past few weeks for the World Heavyweight Championship. Austin Theory was the only one in his 20s. Everybody else was pretty much late 30s, early 40s. Meaning that there is a very deep lack of young talent on the main roster. All of which is currently in NXT. Something that did not happen 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago. Even when WWE had FCW or the OVW or even Deep South Wrestling at one point. That didn't happen because the entire purpose of those territories was train them in WWE style and then bring them up to the main roster so that we get their development and their main potential on Raw, on SmackDown, on the pay-per-views. Now, it seems that all these young superstars end up on NXT for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, sometimes rotting. Tommaso Ciampa, Johnny Gargano, we got the best out of them in NXT, but they were stuck in NXT purgatory for more time than they should have. I believe they were both in NXT for about 5, 6 years in their own separate cases. And yes, we had fantastic matches, but Tommaso Ciampa is currently injured. He had a surgery. Johnny Gargano, injured. He'll be back soon, but their potential in NXT is not showing in WWE. And if NXT is meant to be its own brand, then get it the hell out of the Performance Center. Get it the hell out of that crowd that is very much TNA Impact 2006 to 2010. It's that bad of a crowd to the point that sometimes they don't add to the show. Sometimes they do. Most of the times they try to hijack the show and try to steer it in the direction that they want to because they are there every single week. So they feel like they have that power over NXT themselves. And I've had a lot of comments, a lot of people on social media say that, oh, a guy like Dominic Mysterio, he doesn't know how to wrestle. He should be sent down to NXT to truly develop his craft. No. Okay, first of all, he's the biggest heat magnet WWE has right now. And yes, his potential as a professional wrestler, as a WWE superstar, is we're nowhere near to that. But I'd rather have his development take place on the main roster, where you have a deeper, more wider audience capable of watching and getting to know Dominic Mysterio, rather than sending him down to NXT and be in obscurity. Because very few people know who Carmelo Hayes is. Very few people know who Braun Breaker is. Very few people know who Wes Lee is. Isla Fire, Abaddon, all these superstars that have currently been called up to the main roster. Fans don't know who they are because they don't watch NXT. They don't watch that product. They don't keep up with their careers there. Basically, they're in obscurity until they come to the main roster. And then we wonder why Bronson Reed, fantastic superstar, gets no reaction on the main roster for the past 2-3 months. Why? Because they're stuck in NXT purgatory. And it's this entire concept of, it has to be perfection. It has to be perfect on the main roster. Well, we would have missed out on Kofi Kingston on the main roster if he had stayed in developmental. And if he hadn't gone through ECW, Raw, SmackDown, and all of it. We would have been missing out on so many stars. John Cena back in 2002. He was not ready for the main roster, but they kept him around. And he learned to develop on the main roster, which is what you need to do. NXT, for me, at this point, it's a fantastic show. I'm sure about that, even without watching, even without keeping up with the weekly broadcast. But NXT should be at most a 12 to 18 month process where independent wrestlers or college athletes arrive to the Performance Center. They train under WWE trainers. They learn how to do the WWE style. They find their own identity, their own character, their own gimmick, their own wrestling moves. And then they hopefully move up to the main roster. And then on the main roster, you have like a 3 to 6 month period where you find out if you're really made for the WWE, or if you get future endeavor and you go back to the independents and work on your craft there. That's why the independents are there for. NXT is just a training ground to make them WWE-esque. That is it. At least that's my point of view. Because at this point, if you're not going to have NXT be a touring brand in terms of its weekly show and its pay-per-view broadcast, then what the hell are you doing with the NXT brand? And why the hell are Hayes, Breaker, Lee, and so many other superstars just rotting in WWE's developmental system when they could be on the main roster putting out bangers and having the crowd get familiar with them over the next 1, 2, 3, 4 years where it actually matters? So with that said, again, it's just a rant about NXT, a show that I unfortunately can't keep up with at this moment. I know there's a lot of fans out there that love the show, keep up with the show on a weekly basis. I'm not hating on that. I'm not hating on the show itself. I'm just hating on the entire concept of NXT because, frankly, superstars should not be in that territory, to put it that way, for that damn long without actually coming up to the main roster. So with that said, what do you think about these thoughts? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you feel like NXT is good as it is? Do you think most of these superstars should just be called up to the main roster? That way we can enjoy some dream matches on Raw and SmackDown. Leave your thoughts, comments, and predictions on the comment section below. I'm Alexis Carrillo. This has been Wrestling Talk. Tune in later on tonight to the USA Network for another episode of NXT, of course, and I'll see you next time.